Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. We're just going to give everyone a couple of minutes just to get comfortable and entered in today's webinar, and then we'll kick things off. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Alicia Vaz. I'm an account manager in the architecture, engineering and construction team. But today I'm delighted to be back as your host for the ArcGIS Update Winter Edition 2023. Now, in today's webinar, we'll be taking a look at all the latest and greatest updates to make its way through to the ArcGIS system this quarter, giving you a chance to hear what's new, but most importantly, allowing your organisation to start to plan for the future. So make sure you grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, because you are in for a real treat today. Now, joining me today, I have a stellar lineup of presenters for you. We will be joined by our Chief Technical Officer, Mark Wells, Claire Williams, our Product Communications Manager, and two of our incredible GIS consultants, Eve Selby and Claudia Hudson. The team have kindly stepped out of Esri's workshop today to join us, so thank you, team, and we're very much looking forward to hearing what you have in store for us today. But before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. Today's webinar will be recorded, so if you do need to step out at any point, please do not fear. A copy of the recording, all the resources referenced, and a copy of the slide deck will be circulated in a follow-up email. Now, we will not be taking a live Q&A, but we will be capturing questions and feedback on Slido. Please make sure that you upvote or like any of the questions that resonate with you, as we will be doing our best to answer them in the follow-up email. To access Slido, you can either scan the QR code on screen or navigate to slido.com and enter in the event code. Near the end of the webinar, please keep an eye out for the poll section. That will become live near the end of the webinar, and in there, you'll be able to submit your feedback. Please let us know how you found today's session, but also how you found the series and perhaps what you might like to see in the next year. So with that, on to the agenda. We're going to kick things off with the headline news, a few short, sharp and sweet updates to be aware of this quarter. We'll then hear from Mark, who's going to give us a bit of an update on the technology and the direction of travel for next year. Before jumping into the technology stack, where we'll explore what's new in ArcGIS Pro, we'll take a look at Workflow Manager, and we're going to finish things off today with a few of our favourite updates to make its way through to ArcGIS Online. So with that, let's get started with the headline news. Now, last month, we welcomed the latest release of ArcGIS Enterprise, version 11.2. And as anticipated, we saw several updates to everything from the map viewer to administration settings, all the way through to server roles, filtering down to the individual apps. So we're going to dig into some of these elements in a little bit more detail. And first up, we have the map viewer. So at version 11.2, spatial and raster analytical tools are now readily available, giving us parity with what used to be available in Map Viewer Classic. It's easier than ever to find the tool that you're looking for using the search bar. You can navigate into each tool and set the environmental settings. And when you share that web map with colleagues or individuals, all the parameters that you used from the tool will be saved. So if they're looking to rerun the analysis again, they can follow the settings that you originally input. We've also seen an introduction of the metadata editor, which is in beta. Now, it's always been possible to add in basic metadata to your items, but now we're supporting metadata styles. So if you have a style sheet or a schema that you want to support, this should help you in your organization to ensure that individuals are adhering to the standard that you have implemented. Moving on, we also have a brand new user type extension called ArcGIS Advanced Editing. And this provides you with access to advanced geodatabase functionality and frameworks. It's also replacing Utility Network, Parcel Fabric, and Trace Network that were licensed at previous versions. Now, this user type is available if you currently have ArcGIS Pro Standard and Advanced, but it is also an optional add-on if you are using an editor or above. In terms of content, when it comes to version 11.2, we have 4 brand new field types which are in beta. Everything from data only, timestamp offset, and big integer. Essentially making it easier than ever for you to manipulate and work with different data formats. And when it comes to data management, it is now possible to manage your services directly through the enterprise portal, rather than navigating off to the server page. So next up, we have apps, and in Enterprise 11.2, we have a brand new template in story maps known as briefings, which is in beta. Perhaps if you work in public safety, emergency services, or simply want to brief a more strategic audience, then this template could be for you. It allows you to bring together several web maps and other items of information in terms of multimedia and present that information back in a slideshow presentation. So again, it's strategic, it's quick to set up, and has a lot of use cases. Moving on to instant apps, we now see support with the inset template. Again, if you're thinking about working at different scales, then this could be a really useful visualization technique for you. To put this into practice, if you haven't come across inset before, if you think about the COVID-19 pandemic and the spreads, you could focus in not only on the spread and the pandemic in the UK, but you could also filter in onto different cities and understand how the pandemic changed and varied over time. So again, really useful if you're working at small or large scale. And in terms of ArcGIS Experience Builder, as of this release, there are several new widgets and templates available. If you're new to Experience Builder or you want to stand up an application quite quickly, then we'd always recommend exploring the templates. It's a great way to think about the setup, the layout, without starting from scratch. So moving on to ArcGIS Online, and we saw several updates to make its way through to this product in October. For administrators, it's now possible to increase security with multi-factor authentication. Once the setting has been toggled on, individuals will not only have to log into the account, but they will also need to enter in a one-time passcode to gain access. There's also been a lot of traction across several of our industries, from AEC to transport to government, around oriented imagery in the past 6 months or so. So much so that we now support a new feature layer type known as oriented imagery, which is directly supported in the map viewer. So if you're capturing 360 imagery, you want to see the location, the view, but also the output, then this could be a really nice tool to export. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the use cases as we go into next year. And in terms of visualization techniques, ArcGIS Online now supports box plots. So if you are working with large and vast volumes of data, you're interested in the statistics, the variation, or the distribution across quartiles, this is a nice way to report back on your project or your data set to colleagues or individuals alike on a project. Now, these are just some of the updates to make its way through, but we have also seen several enhancements, from things like improvements to the sketch layer to pop-ups, and there's more on those enhancements to come in our follow-up documentation. Now, last quarter when we met, we introduced data pipelines, which is still in beta. But for those of you who weren't able to join us, just a high-level overview, data pipelines is a brand new capability which allows you to connect to multiple data sets, to be able to prepare and transform that data and output that data in a particular format. But as of the October release, we now support scheduling, which is still in beta. So if you're thinking about running your workflow on a regular basis, then this could be something to explore. And finally, it's time for us to announce that ArcGIS Collector, as of October 2024, will be retiring. But please do not fear, because ArcGIS Field Maps is here to replace it. If you haven't used Field Maps before, it has all the capabilities of Collector and then some on top. It essentially amalgamates several of the capabilities that you would have seen from lots of our individual applications. But at a basic level, you will be able to still capture and edit data, submit data in a smart form in an intuitive manner. It supports utility networks. You can work in an offline or online environment, and you have the ability to share locations and set up alerts. So please take a look at this. Again, Field Maps is really advancing in terms of capabilities, and if you have any questions whatsoever, please do get in touch with your account managers, and we'd be more than happy to help you with the migration process. So that brings us to the end of the headline news for this quarter. And I'd now like to hand you over to Mark Wells, who is our Chief Technical Officer. And Mark's going to walk us through some of the wider themes that we've seen this quarter, but also talk us through some of the developments that we might see going into 2024. So Mark, over to you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Alicia. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. It's great to see so many people on the session today. Just bear with me while I share my screen with you. Hopefully you can see that coming through. So there are a few areas that I want to talk to you and share with you today. But the first thing that I really need to draw your attention to is a really important matter for ArcGIS Enterprise customers. So we have recently discovered that there's been a defect with one of our security patches. It's called the Portal for ArcGIS Enterprise Sites patch. This news is hot off the press. You or somebody in your organization, if you use ArcGIS Enterprise, should have received an email about this just overnight. So it applies to versions 10.8.1, 10.9.1, and 11.1 on the Windows environment only. So if you're running one of these versions, it's really important that you know what to do. So firstly, I want to reassure you that the patch, the security patch that's defective, it does actually effectively address the security of vulnerability that it was intended to. So if you've installed the patch, your system is secure, and that's a good thing, right? Secondly, your system should continue to remain fully functional, so you can continue to use it, your users can continue to sign in, create content, participate in sharing and collaboration, all of that good stuff you can continue to do. But what you need to be aware of is that the defective patch causes some side effects with the actual installation, which means that if you try and install any further patches, or if you try and upgrade your system, or if you try and uninstall any components, these actions will fail and your system may become inoperable. So to avoid this, our guidance is really, really clear. If you've installed the Portal for ArcGIS Enterprise Sites patch, just put a change freeze on your system from an installation and configuration perspective. Don't install any other additional Portal for ArcGIS patches or hotfixes. Don't uninstall any either, because that can also damage your system. And don't uninstall or upgrade your portal for ArcGIS environment. We are in the process of releasing a scan and repair tool which fixes this issue. In fact, for 11.1 users, we've actually released that just within the last 48 hours. So you can see on this article, you can click through to the validation and repair tool. You can go and download that tool and run it on your system, and it will determine whether your system is affected, and it will be able to fix it if that's the case. If you're running 10.8.1 or 10.9.1, just need to hold tight while we release the tools for that in the new year. If you've got any other queries or you're uncertain about anything in the meantime, we've got a tech support team that are on standby ready to help you. So please log a technical support case. Of course, you can also speak with your account manager. I'm going to share the link for this in the chat. So if you haven't come across this technical article, we'll also share it in the doing that. Claudia, maybe you can do that on my behalf. But we'll also share the technical article afterwards when we share some of the resources from this webinar. Okay, moving on to some more exciting things. I've seen this slide before. When I start to talk about ArcGIS, I often use this slide. I think it's really helpful wide-angle lens on how we at Esri go about doing our work, which is taking the power of decision-making with geography to different audiences and trying to serve the needs of these different groups of people within their specific context, making it as simple as possible to answer questions and model systems using geography. Now, one area we've been doing this recently is in partnership with Microsoft. We've been working with them on their new data and analytics platform called Microsoft Fabric. You might have heard of it. It was released just a few weeks ago. And what it is really an end-to-end unified analytics platform that's for use by businesses and data professionals, people like data analysts, data scientists, developers, and so on. And what's really exciting for me is we've been working closely with Microsoft to integrate ArcGIS with Fabric. So this is going to allow these data professionals to make use of spatial analytics and spatial data science natively within the Fabric SaaS environment. And why are we doing this? Well, I think on this call today, we in the GIS community, I think many of us will recognize as a community that we've got something special together. You're here today, probably at least in part because you understand and recognize how powerful geography is for helping us to understand our world, for doing things like building and representing systems, for modeling different scenarios, for asking questions and getting answers in order to make better real world decisions. And so at Esri, we see our mission as to proliferate and broaden the understanding of the power of geography and GIS, to grow this community, to make this specialist knowledge general knowledge, and to continue to simplify access to those approaches that we can all benefit from and to make them available to wider groups of people. And really making ArcGIS available through Microsoft Fabric is just one way that we're doing that. And so look out for the integration of that, which is set to launch in Q2 next year. I also wanted to share with you, Alicia spoke a bit about this, some of the themes and the directions and the areas of focus as we continue to build and develop the ArcGIS system. And when we were together, I think it was in the summer that we last ran an event like this, I talked a little bit about the nature of professional GIS and how we see that changing. So if we look back in time, traditionally we've used desktop tools as the primary environment for doing that type of work. But with the advent and the maturity of web GIS, we've been increasingly able to bring professional GIS capabilities to the web. And one example that Alicia talked a little bit about earlier with this is with the new advanced editing user type extension, which allows you to add those professional capabilities into editor, mobile worker, creator user types, and obviously the higher level user types that it comes with as well. We've used this to provide access to those professional capabilities through browser-based applications like Suite for ArcGIS and Utility Network Editor. And one of the reasons that we're able to do this is because browsers are becoming increasingly powerful and performant. So let me share with you a couple of examples that really bring that to light. So firstly, here I've got a DTM Explorer application. I've got a digital terrain model of the world, and it's symbolized by a color ramp from red in the high elevations down to blue in the low elevations. But with the power of a modern browser, I can ask this application to re-symbolize on the fly and apply my color ramp to a much finer range of elevations. So think of this like I've got a set number of colors in my color ramp, and currently it's being applied across all elevations. I effectively am squeezing the number of elevations that same range of colors is being applied to. And as I do that, information starts to come to the fore. You can see United Kingdom actually coming into focus as I do that. So I'm operating here obviously at a global scale, and that can create some nice visualizations, but I actually think the power of this becomes a lot more apparent when we look at some of the micro scales. So let's just zoom into some of the coastline here around Dover. I'm just going to give it a second to let the DTM update. This application is performing hundreds of spatial operations a second in order to symbolize this. And as you can see here, it doesn't look very impressive. I'm applying that color ramp over a vast range of elevations, really, which means that this all is in the noise, right? Around Dover, it doesn't really look like there's too much going on. So let's do a little bit more, and let's start to squeeze that range down a little bit further. And you can see some different things start to happen. So firstly, the area around the marina starts to come into focus. You can just see the outlines of that. And as I've zoomed in there, you can also see some of these walls and battlements of these military bases are also coming to the fore. See if I can make that a little bit clearer. How about that? So this area around here is actually Dover Castle, and you can see the walls of the castle and the outline there. And up here, very distinctive area that's called Fort Burgoyne. Now I can show you these features on a topographic map. You can pick them out immediately. This is exactly the same area, but obviously this is a topographic map. Here in the DTM, I'm actually pulling these out through the elevation of the data, just symbolizing the elevation information in the data. And I'm doing that actively in real time in a browser. I mean, this is pretty phenomenal performance that we wouldn't have had just a few years ago. So that's an example of how we're able to harness some of the power that we now have in browsers to perform activities that previously we would have required the power of desktop tools to perform. Let's look at one other example just before I hand back to Alicia. Let's take the example of generalization. So if I zoom out of this map and away from Dover, you can see obviously the castle and all of those battlements disappear, right? And that's because what we've done is created a map cache with different levels of detail, different levels of generalization at different scales. And as you zoom in and out, we show different pre-cooked visualizations of the same data. So we maintain multiple levels of data, we pre-generate those, and when information changes, we have to go back and manage those data sets and generate those informations. And that can be a lot of work. We're effectively storing the same data multiple times. Imagine that we could actually store the data once at its highest level of detail and then ask the browser to generalize that information at a sensible level when I'm zooming in and out of the map. So here's an example of doing just that. This is Newport Station in South Wales. Now, first of all, let me show you what it looks like when we don't generalize information. As I zoom out from the station, you can see that the railway lines become really bulky, way too big for the area. All of the information and the labeling on the map just gets really cluttered. It's just not a helpful place to be. So let's go back in and start to turn on some dynamic generalization. So now I'm asking the application to choose what to show me. And it's not showing me pre-canned information, but instead it's taking these polygons and these lines and it's actively generalizing them on the fly. It's doing hundreds, if not thousands, of geospatial operations right here in the browser. You can see that initially the railway lines converge, and then as we go further out, the detail around the shops and the concessions on the station platform merge until we actually have just a station represented by a polygon or even by a dot. So this is really, really significant performance on a client side in a browser, performing operations again that we just in previous years we wouldn't have had access to. So I think this is really exciting. Hopefully those kind of examples have highlighted some of the ideas about bringing some of these professional capabilities, harnessing power in the client more, and being able to bring to WebGIS some of the things that traditionally would have been constrained to desktop environments. And that really is one of the themes that we're going to continue to focus on at Esri throughout 2024. So all that's remained really for me to say to you is have a great Christmas, very happy Christmas to all of you, and I look forward to connecting with many of you next year. Okay, back to you, Alicia.
Thank you, Mark. That was great. It's incredible to see just how far SaaS solutions have come, and personally I'm very much looking forward to seeing a little bit more about the Microsoft Fabric in the new year. So just as a quick reminder before we get going again, if you haven't already done so, please make sure you log on Slido, get those comments up there, and please make sure you keep liking the questions that resonate with you. We'll try our best to get through as many as possible in our follow-up. So with that, I'd now like to hand you over to Eve, who's going to tell us a little bit more about what's new in ArcGIS Pro 3.2. Eve, take it away.
Thank you very much. So ArcGIS Pro 3.2 was released in late October, and its updates covered everything from analyses and visualization to organization and bug fixes. There were also over 100 ideas implemented from the Ideas User Exchange, so let's see the highlights. So ArcGIS's functionality is continued to be incorporated into ArcGIS Pro releases, including taking inspiration from ArcMap's X-ray add-on, which includes creating this geodatabase schema report. Now, this was created due to popular requests from over 50 different users and communities, which is an area where people can pitch ideas for new additions to Esri products. People wanted an easy-to-operate data dictionary, and that's exactly what this is. If you're currently using ArcMap but are wanting to know more about migrating to ArcGIS Pro, please be sure to check out the resources that follow this webinar for more information as well. With that, I would now love to be able to take you into ArcGIS Pro. When it comes to generating a schema report, it's found under geoprocessing. And again, you just have to find the data set you'd like, where you'd like to store it, and then what you'd like to call it. One of the things that's incredibly useful is that there are a variety of different formats that you can choose from, which makes it really easy to collaborate with others in your organization. So let's see what it looks like in an XLS form. So one of the main points that the team wanted to create is to have something that's easy for anyone to navigate. So this is the table of contents page where you've got summary information, including a timestamp of when the report was created. It's easy to navigate. This is decked out with a variety of nested links to be able to take you to the properties of your data. And if we right-click along the bottom, this is an Activate dialog, which basically allows you to globally navigate and see every sheet within this workbook. It also includes the ability to understand not only the properties, but the different fields or even attribute rules as well. Now, another improvement was when it comes to field types. So as people are transitioning to having increasing data, we now have 64-bit OIDs. So you are no longer constrained to a measly 2.14 billion. And then when it comes to the field types themselves, we have big integer field types, which are now much longer than the limit within the long integer field type. There is the timestamp offset, date, and time only as well. Continuing with this theme of improving your efficiency in ArcGIS Pro, let's start with keyboard shortcuts. So if you use Pro often, keyboard shortcuts are about to rock your world and make it much faster to perform repetitive tasks, whether it's opening a new map or exporting features. Whatever actions are things that you perform often, it's now incredibly easy to make these shortcuts using this new dialog box. With editing, it now allows you to require manual tool enablement in the workspace that you'll be editing in. This allows you to enable a single workspace session, which means that you can manually save and discard edits directly from that edit ribbon. And then when it comes to geoprocessing, when you've selected, highlighted, or filtered down a subset of the data, you can now use this toggle button to process all of these input records or just a subset of them. Another geoprocessing improvement is that you can customize the icon and the description models for the script tools that are displayed on the ribbon and the quick access toolbar. So if you're wanting to distinguish one of your favorite tools from all of the others, then this is one way to do so, making them much easier to find. Now, visualization was another key component which was focused on in this update. But before we continue in the slides, I wanted to delve into that in ArcGIS Pro and see one of these enhancements in action. So with styles, there have been a few improvements here. So styles are containers which store symbols, colors, labels, and a lot more as well. And with this update, you have everything in this map that could be packaged into a single style with just a few clicks. So at the moment, this current style reads a bit more like a Jackson Pollock painting. We've taken a few data sets from the Living Atlas, and I want to make a map for hiking using these layers. But seeing as we're in the holiday season, I would like it to be winter wonderlandy. And I would also like it to be accessible to colorblind folks and replicable so that other colleagues could also adapt this symbology to their own winter workflows. So now that I've picked an area of interest of my map and I've gone through the process of symbology and labeling, I've made a few changes. Now, before we package this up, I want to check to make sure that this is accessible. This tool is not new to the update, but I do think it is a useful one to bring out, which is the Color Vision Simulator. Now, after this little detour into other cool tools in ArcGIS Pro, let's head back to the styles themselves. So before this update, as I've mentioned, you'd need to save all of these items to a style individually, which could be time consuming if you have lots to symbolize, requires you to remember to do it per item too. But with this improvement, you're now able to do this in a single click. Go to Share, Item Styles, and then you can bring it into the folder of your choice. With it, it means that you're also able to share this with colleagues. They could apply it to their own workflows, and you can access and organize all of these style classes from the catalog pane. So let's now go through a few other improvements to visualization in Pro, starting with all things 3D. So along with being one of Esri UK's favorite things for the year, which Claudia will mention later, it's also worth noting that enhancements to your 3D scenes have been made in ArcGIS Pro as well. So 3D base maps are available from the Living Atlas, and then 3D tiles are a new layer type, which you could use to visualize 3D objects as well as mesh data sets. However, combined with other data layers, these 3D tiles could also be used beyond visualization for use in analysis, animations, layouts, and more. Up next is thematic mapping. So map series themselves aren't new, but thematic mapping is a new kid on the block where you can create a map series that iterates through your layers. And this allows you to create incredibly informative content, which is perfect for presenting and easy to do. It iterates through each group within a layer where the map frame will remain consistent and the new data will update. The nice thing is that everything outside of the specified group layer that you're wanting to go through will remain visible. So as you're switching between pages, you'll still have that additional content from the outside data. Then we have oriented imagery. So this includes handling different image types, whether it's oblique and drone imagery or close range inspections and street level. And as you pan and zoom to explore different perspectives, the footprint is going to update dynamically, as you can see here. And it also includes the ability to enhance any of these images. With oriented imagery becoming further integrated into the ArcGIS system, you can now share your findings in Pro to other online applications as well, like Experience Builder. So, as I mentioned previously, there have been over 100 ideas that were implemented from this user exchange, and these were just a few of the more prominent ones that I found. But there are also hundreds of other details that went into this update that I wanted to bring a little bit of attention to, like the new trapezium patch shape, discrete qualitative color schemes, and some very snazzy looking 3D trees. But for the full breakdown, please head to the ArcGIS Pro documentation page, which is also going to be included in the follow-up email. And with that, I will hand it back to Alicia.
Thank you, Eve. It always blows my mind just how many of those enhancements and requests come through to each release. So if you ever find yourself wanting to log an idea with us, please make sure you put it on our ideas website and it will be considered for the upcoming releases. So next, I'd like to hand it over to Claire Williams. Claire is the head of product comms at Esri UK, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about Workflow Manager. So Claire, over to you.
Hello, thank you. Hi everyone, my name's Claire. I am the Product Communications Manager here at Esri UK, and today I'm going to walk us through an introduction to Workflow Manager for ArcGIS Online. So I'll cover what Workflow Manager is, the different options for actually using it, and then I'll jump into a demonstration in ArcGIS Online, and I'll finish with some example workflows as well at the end. So what is Workflow Manager? In a nutshell, Workflow Manager is a workflow management system that helps us to distribute GIS and non-GIS tasks. And you can essentially think of this as a way to break down and manage large workloads by providing real-time tools for managing people, processes, and individual steps required to complete a work task. And the Workflow Manager supports this in 3 key steps. The first of these steps is design. This allows users to create workflows or processes that are automated and repeatable. You can produce shared queries and charts, as well as managing access to all of the jobs and all of the data that you require to complete them. The second step is manage, and this is where users looking after the work stream, so maybe a manager or a program manager, can summarize and update jobs so that we can make better decisions based on that data and prevent work delays. And then finally, the work stage. This allows users to bring the organization's content together in one place so that team members can see the work assigned to them and carry out that work in a really streamlined user interface, all within the Workflow Manager itself. So Workflow Manager isn't new, you might have heard of it before. It's been long available as part of ArcGIS Enterprise and has an accompanying Pro extension. However, it was just released for ArcGIS Online in July of this year. So I think this is a really exciting development, making it more accessible and flexible for teams who are working in ArcGIS Online. And it's the ArcGIS Online version that I'll be demonstrating today. So at this point, you might now be wondering, what can we actually achieve with this and how can we use it in practice? So for a demo, I'm going to use this scenario as a bit of a basis. So this team are working together to collect information about specific areas of land from over 300 stakeholders. They need to distribute tasks between them and ensure that they are reviewed correctly at each stage. So breaking down the steps that the team need to get there then. They will work individually to complete each task, gathering location information on specific customer cases, completing a Survey 123 form as part of that, and they also need to be able to attach PDF documents and leave comments on individual cases if needed. For standard responses, they will need to be peer reviewed before being marked as complete. But for those more complex or out of the ordinary cases, they will need to be escalated to the senior team. So managing a large project with many moving parts, the team might start to wonder how they should manage distributing these tasks, marking each one as complete, making sure they're all reviewed by the right person and that there's a quality and consistency against this data and information that they're collecting. Maybe they'll turn to spreadsheets or emails to track the work. But what I'd like to do is step through Workflow Manager and see how that could help us out here in this scenario. So this is the Workflow Manager interface. And the first thing that I want to point out is that the steps that we've seen earlier are here at the top. So we have design, manage, and work. So let's then start in design. So this is where we can do 2 things. We can create those workflows and we can also create what's called associate job templates. So if we start in workflows, this is where we can build that repeatable workflow to guide our users. And I've pre-built this one for the steps in our scenario that we just covered. And you'll notice that this is a model builder style. And if I click edit, we can see that these are drag and drop elements. So I've created this workflow from the available options on the left to guide my team through the required steps. If I take a look at some of those elements, we can do everything from adding a location to a map, automatically sending an email, adding an attachment, and even opting to open a specific pro project and running a specific GP processing tool. If we step through our workflow, it opens an existing web map and asks the user to select an area of interest. And then next, it opens an existing survey 123, and you can link this to your content by providing the item ID. And then thinking about our scenario from earlier, it then asks a question to determine if there is any additional information. And if the answer to this is no, then we know that this just needs to go through a peer review step and then will be marked as complete. But if the answer to this is yes, then it follows the workflow through the left-hand side and then asks the user if you have any attachments, do you have any comments, and then it sends it off for a senior review. And if we take a look at this specific step, we can decide who to assign this job to. So for this, I've chosen the admin group. I've also hooked the senior review up to an email notification so that the team manager can know when an escalation has been made on the job. For each workflow or new job that you create as part of a workflow or design, you also need to create a job template. This job template, it's just opening now, details what happens when a job is created and what workflow it is associated with. So for this one, it's quite simple because I've set myself as the only user, so all jobs will be assigned to me. But in this option, I can also set start and stop and duration settings for each of these jobs as well. And then once I've created a workflow and a job template, I can then start to distribute that work to the team using the Manage tab. So this is where managers or program managers can oversee the jobs created and their status. And it's also where individuals can see the jobs that are just assigned to them. These charts at the top can be customized to reflect the stats that are most important to you. And thankfully, I don't seem to have any overdue tasks yet. So first, let's see how we create a task for us to work on, and it'll just appear like this one in the dashboard below. So if I look at job 22, I can zoom to this job's location, and this is one that I started earlier, so you could see how this looks. So in the details tab for job 22, we can see some more information, but most importantly, we can see the history of this specific job. So this is really good because it creates an auditable trail through the workflow, so I can see what has happened at every step and who actioned it. So this system offers more than just tracking jobs via maybe an email or a spreadsheet. It's an efficient job management system, as well as keeping everything in ArcGIS Online, creating this really focused view for those who are managing the work streams, and also for those who are actually undertaking the work itself. So finally, the work tab. This is where the people doing the work can actually see their jobs and start to action them. So let's see how working through a job actually works. So I'm going to start job 23 in this instance, and you'll see that I did start job 22 earlier and I haven't quite finished that one yet, so it's still processing. You'll notice that the jobs are all created and completed entirely within ArcGIS Online, of course, unless you've specified for one of those pro projects to open and a GP processing tool to run. These jobs are designed to guide the user through each step, and so users don't need to be a GIS expert to navigate and complete these jobs in the system, because each of the steps adhere to the rules that are created by the designer in the workflow. So if I now step through this workflow, I'm defining the job's location. So I can use the tools to select this area in the middle here. And then I'll press proceed. And you'll start to see that that seems to be loading inside. And what we're looking for is the green tick to let us know that that step has been completed. And now we're moving to the next one. So thinking about our scenario earlier, I'm expecting this now to let me complete a survey 123. My survey 123 will open. I've created quite a simple one so that we didn't have to spend a long time filling it out today. So date and time of interview, and I've pre-populated that. And then I'm just simply choosing a land use, and I've used a living atlas layer to pre-populate those options. So now that's processing again, and now I'm expecting a question. So I'm expecting to ask me, do I have any additional information? So for this example, I'm going to say yes, because I want to see what happens when it lets me attach a PDF or add a comment. For this specific one, I didn't make attaching a PDF mandatory, so I should just be able to skip this step and go straight to adding a comment to let the senior reviewer know a little bit more information. So I can just proceed with this one, but of course you can make it mandatory so that you can't skip without adding an attachment if that suits your workflow. And then the last step I'm going to show today is just adding this comment. So I'm just going to let the senior reviewer know that the client really requires additional information from a land agent. Okay, so let's now head back into our slides and review this scenario from earlier. So what I've showed you today is that we've managed to use Workflow Manager to create a workflow diagram and associated job templates to effectively manage and distribute this work across the team. It ensures there's this auditable trail and that the work is assigned and also signed off by the appropriate people, always providing managers with a view into the work's progress. So we've just stepped through one simple and quite specific workflow, but there are so many ways that you could use Workflow Manager, and I've popped some of those ideas onto this slide. I mentioned earlier that you can even launch ArcGIS Pro in the Workflow Manager to complete a specific geoprocessing task. We've seen options for automatically assigning work to specific users or groups, and you could do this depending on team experience. We could explore webhooks and automatically create a job when a user submits a survey 123. And hopefully you can see that there are lots of possibilities, and these are just a really small handful of examples. So I hope that's given you a flavour of what ArcGIS Workflow Manager is all about. I think it's really exciting that it's available in ArcGIS Online, and it opens up the possibilities for managing and distributing repeatable work in many industries. So that's all from me today. Back to you, Alicia.
Thank you, Claire. Really powerful stuff there, and I'd echo that sentiment. Really excited to see how it's going to be used in ArcGIS Online by customers. So next up, I'd like to introduce you to Claudia. Claudia is going to take us through some of our favourite features from ArcGIS Online. So Claudia, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alicia. Hope you guys can see my screen and can just about still say good morning, everyone. I'm a GIS consultant in our product communications team, and as Alicia mentioned, we're going to be taking a look at ArcGIS Online. But instead of just focusing on the latest release that came in October, we're actually going to look at the new capabilities and functionality that came throughout 2023. And to do that, I've actually carried out a survey with our staff here at Esri UK, asking them what their favourite feature is, so that we get a really nice mix of different capabilities, and really you get a bit of an insight into some of the things that we're talking about. So let's go through a couple of those now. First up, we have Dewal, who's one of our principal consultants at Esri UK, and Dewal has praised the new 3D topographic base map. So it's making it really easy to visualize an environment in 3D, create a digital twin of your area of interest, and kick off your 3D analysis and exploration workflows. And this became available with the June release of ArcGIS Online. So here we have the 3D topographic base map. It's showing a rather recognizable urban landscape. And this base map not only provides the 3D buildings you can see, but also trees and place names as well if you want to have those. But I have turned them off in this scenario. Now, the 3D topographic base map isn't the only 3D base map available. If we head over to Edinburgh, we're showing now the streets 3D base map that's currently in beta. You might also recognise I couldn't resist playing with those weather effects and the daylight effects as well that you've got available in Scene Viewer. Now heading over to Cardiff, we've got the navigation 3D base map, and I'm definitely no reflection on the Welsh weather here. It's just another weather effect that I wanted to show. And then lastly, one final trip heading to Liverpool. There's also the OpenStreetMap base map that's also currently in beta. So there's a whole heap of different 3D base maps available to you, as well as the topographic one that Dewal mentioned. And I've shown them here today in the scene viewer with those weather effects. But as Eve mentioned earlier, they're also supported in ArcGIS Pro. So really recommend checking those out on Scene Viewer or Pro. We're going to now take a look at another favourite feature. This time it is from Dave, who works in our education team as a GIS education consultant. Now, Dave's favourite feature from this year is one of the new instant app templates, specifically Atlas. Now, this template was first introduced in February this year in beta, and with one of the latest releases, it's officially become out of beta. And as Dave mentioned, it's a really good template for sharing with non-GIS specialists because it brings together all of those useful functions that you'd expect in a typical app, but in a really simple interface that anyone can get along with. Before we go into that template though, let's first have a look at instant apps as a whole. And for those of you that don't know, it's one of our web app builder offerings alongside story maps and ArcGIS Experience Builder, for example. And with the ArcGIS Web App Builder retiring in the next few years, it's definitely a fantastic contender for considering when migrating. It offers a really simple wizard interface for creating an app that suits you, and it provides 20 templates to actually help you kind of kickstart your app building as well. You definitely don't need to know all 20 templates inside out. There's actually on the left-hand side, you can see there the suggestions pane, which is fantastic for narrowing down the templates that might best suit you by asking you questions like, what is it you want to do with your app? What capabilities do you want in your app? And then Instant App will filter it down to the ones that help you achieve your goals. And while there are templates and a wizard-like configuration process, it's really impressive to see the extent that Instant App offers in terms of configuration and customization, both in the settings, but also the way that your app looks as well, being able to add your own brand with the use of colors and logos. And if you're used instant apps before and you're thinking, I haven't been able to access those kind of settings and advanced settings, that's because you need to turn off the Express tab you see on the top left-hand side there, and that opens up a whole host of other settings for you to kind of dig in a little bit deeper with. But let's get back to Dave's favorite feature, which is the Atlas template. Now, it's one of the newest templates to come to instant apps. And the reason for its creation was actually the ambition to create an app that combats all the challenges that novice users of GIS experience. And with the collaboration between Esri and the National Geographic Society, this template was born. Now, to show it in action, our Esri UK education team have created an app named the Geography Visualizer. And that's what I'm going to show today. Using the Atlas template, it provides a curated set of maps and data to share with others in that really usable and customizable interface. And while the story behind this creation was with schools in mind, it's definitely not the only sector that needs to provide non-GIS specialists with access to maps and data, but instead it's got a great use for a wide range of sectors. So let's take a look at this app now to give you a bit of a flavour. But before we delve into the app itself, I just want to show that the actual app content is controlled by a group containing a combination of layers and web maps, which you want the user in the app to see. So let's start by opening up a ready-made app in our application here. And I'm going to head to the Open Map button at the bottom. And let's open up the Earthquakes and Volcanoes map. Now, as that loads in, if I head over to the layers for this map, you're going to see only one of those layers is currently visible. And that's because I can actually toggle the visibility. I've got access to all things like that. I can choose which layers I want to turn on and off. I can do even things like control the transparency of each individual layer. Maybe the tectonic plate boundaries, I'm not interested in being too prominent. I have access to things like a swipe tool to look at different layers, or maybe even access the table of individual layers as well. So really, I've got everything that you might expect in a typical GIS app. It's just in this really simple interface with all of this in one place for me to access. As well as being able to open up maps in the group, we can also add individual layers and really start to piece data together. For example, let's say I'm interested in knowing what the land cover is in the areas of these earthquakes. I can go ahead and add that layer. I could rearrange it if in my map layers so that the earthquake stands above the land cover data set. And if I zoom in, I can really quickly start to understand the different land covers of areas experiencing earthquakes. And I'm piecing together information that's curated and provided to me by my GIS team, but I can confidently explore this in this interface. Once I have a map that I'm happy with, again, you've kind of got all those capabilities you'd expect, exporting to a PDF, screenshot, or if they have their own ArcGIS Online account, they can save and share that map as well within their organization. So hopefully that has given a flavour of the new template available in Instant Apps and shown that it can be a fantastic tool for you to share your maps, your data with your colleagues, your customers, your stakeholders who don't have to be GIS specialists but can confidently explore all that data themselves. I have shared a link to that app in the follow-up email, so you can explore it yourself. And a big thank you to Dave as well for sharing his favourite feature. Let's now move on to another one. And next up, we've got Carmel, who is our lead consultant, one of our lead consultants at Esri UK. And she's got in touch to express her love for the new Arcade editor, and particularly with its troubleshooting and testing capabilities that make it far easier for anyone to pick up Arcade. Now, the eager beavers amongst you might say that this editor came in the November 2022 release. However, we have seen a number of updates come this year to Arcade, including the improved colour syntax, which I'll mention later on. And for enterprise users, the Arcade editor came with version 11.1, which was released this April. For those unfamiliar with Arcade, put simply, it's a lightweight expression language that really allows you to elevate your maps and apps and kind of go beyond the default with what's capable. It's a capability that is increasingly being added across the ArcGIS system, and you can see on screen there the many different apps that it's already available in. Some of its key capabilities as well and reasons for using Arcade is for customizing labels and pop-ups and kind of getting creative with your content in that way, for tidying and calculating your data in relevant fields, and for carrying out spatial analysis tasks as well. But to really understand what Arcade is capable of, for those that didn't see it, I recommend watching last month's webinar all about the possibilities of Arcade, where we started with ArcGIS Pro and taking a look at how it can actually transform your data. We then moved on to taking a look in the map viewer and how you can create pop-ups that go beyond the default. And we then finished with ArcGIS dashboards and looking at how you can actually elevate your dashboard elements with a few lines of code as well. So again, I'll pop a link into the follow-up email if you're interested in watching that webinar. But let's now jump back and actually have a look at the Arcade editor itself. I want to start by saying that it's an editor that has an incredibly supportive interface. So if you're not a coder, that's definitely not an excuse to shy away from using Arcade, as it's targeted at all ArcGIS users and it really supports you through that code writing. I myself, for example, I am not an experienced coder or developer by any means, yet I've used Arcade many times in different ArcGIS apps, so definitely need to look out for it. Let's have a look at this interface then. So firstly, we've got that text window here for writing our Arcade. Beneath, we have the output of your code for test running it. Over on the right-hand side, we've got everything you'd add to your code. So starting with your profile variables for accessing your layers, maps, and data stores, for example. We also have the functions list. So essentially a certain action you want to perform on your data, such as count, for example. And if we select count as our function, you can then see you've got all that additional information and even sample code as well. So again, incredibly supportive for those getting to grips and understanding what function to use. Again, you've got a suggestions pane and also a direct link out to the Arcade documentation, which is definitely worth keeping open when you're writing your Arcade. But let's look at how the updates to the Arcade editor have made it easier to work with. Firstly, it's helped users to write code better with adding more warnings into the editor, helping you to know where something in your expression could be a problem or could be improved. Now that's shown with the use of a squiggly line, with yellow used for a warning and red for an error. And you can see there, if I start to add an extra parentheses that I don't need, I'm given that squiggly line, as well as on the right hand side you get a color block, so that you can see exactly as you write more and more code which lines have those errors. The error messages as well have been made far clearer, so it's easier to understand exactly what needs to be amended. Secondly, it's also helped users to write their arcade faster. So this is actually with the use of IntelliSense. And as you begin writing your code in the editor, it's going to offer snippets for you to then directly add into your code. So you don't have to kind of browse the traditional documentation, and it's especially useful for those who kind of have that a bit more experience with arcade and know which function they're after. As I mentioned at the start as well, you've also got the new color syntax, making sure that it's differentiating the elements far better, as well as the new color vision deficiencies and making sure it meets the WCAG standards. So I strongly recommend you test out the new Arcade editor. It's fantastic. There's a whole library of resources out there, which again we'll link in the follow-up email. And of course, sadly, I've not had time to go through every single feature from our Esri UK team, but here are just a couple more, including improvements to our map viewer with group layers and setting exclusive visibility, through to all of the different widgets that are available in Experience Builder. But hopefully this really has reminded you the amount of updates we've seen, and this is just to ArcGIS Online alone, not even including the rest of the ArcGIS system, and hopefully excites you to test out these capabilities yourself. But for now, I will pass back over to you, Alicia.
Thank you, Claudia. Some great capabilities there that we've just seen. I think it's really exciting, no matter where you are with your journey with GIS, whether you're beginning out with some of the suggestions and instant apps, all the way to getting started with the 3D base maps. There's something in there for everybody. So that is allowing us to draw our webinar to an end today, but please do not fear. We will be back in the new year with a webinar on the 18th of January. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about how you can unleash your creativity with cartography and app design, then please make sure you tune in. More to come on that in our follow-up email, but we will also say keep an eye out on our website for the registration details. So if you haven't already, please make sure you log your questions and upvote questions on Slido. The polls have now gone live, so please make sure you give us your feedback. The Slido session will stay live for the next couple of hours, so you have time if you want to take a break, have lunch, and come back to it. So all that's left for me to say is just a huge thank you to our presenters for taking the time and presenting today. And from all of us at Esri UK, we just like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we're looking forward to seeing everybody back in 2024. Bye for now.